The message came on a Tuesday morning, Galactic Standard Time. Admiral HFY was drinking his morning brew when the communication officer burst into his private quarters on the Dominion flagship. "Sir, we have received an official transmission." "From the Human Federation," the young officer said, his breathing heavy from running .zex single quotes HAI did not look up from his datapad. He had been reading reports about mineral shortages in the outer colonies. What do they want now? More aid for some primitive species? Another peace treaty to write? The officer hesitated. "Sir, they are withdrawing from all galactic treaties." "This time," HFY looked up. His four eyes focused on the officer with sharp attention. "What did you say?" "The humans, sir. They are leaving all alliances, all trade agreements, all diplomatic connections. They say they are going home." HFY set down his cup with a soft click. In his 300 years of military service, he had never heard anything so strange. Humans did not leave things, they fixed them. They stayed and helped and mediated and solved problems that other species could not solve. "Show me the message," he said. The communication plate on the wall. Screen. A human woman in formal diplomatic robes stood behind a podium. Her face was calm, but something in her eyes looked tired. "Very tired. To all member species of the Galactic Council," she began. "The Human Federation hereby formally withdraws from all interstellar treaties, trade agreements, and diplomatic relationships, effective immediately. We thank you for the centuries of cooperation, but humanity has decided to focus on internal development. We wish you all prosperity and peace." The message was short. Too short for something so big. HFY replayed it 3 times. "That is all?" he asked. "Yes, sir. No explanation, no demands." "No threats, just ... goodbye." HFY leaned back in his chair. The leather creaked under his weight. "Humans do not say goodbye. They say see you later, or we will help you with that problem tomorrow. They do not say goodbye." But they had. Within hours, the message had spread across the galaxy. In the crystal palaces of the Vorthak Empire, High Chancellor Mordith laughed when he heard the news. "Good," he said to his advisors. "Now we can expand without their constant whining about ethical colonization and indigenous rights. The humans always slowed us down with their endless committees and moral concerns. The Vorthak were a proud species. Their bodies were made of living crystal that could grow and reshape itself. They had built an empire that spanned 2,000 star systems. They saw themselves as the natural leaders of the galaxy. The humans, with their soft flesh and short lives, had always seemed inferior to them. Useful, perhaps, but inferior. In the vast hive ships of the Shashai collective, the Queen Mind processed the information differently. The Kishari were insect-like beings who shared thoughts across their entire species. To them, the idea of isolation was almost impossible to understand. "The humans withdraw from the network," the Queen Mind spoke to itself, its thoughts echoing through millions of drones. "This is inefficient, but perhaps they have outlived their usefulness. We have learned much from their technology. We can continue without them." The machine intelligence known as the Nexus barely registered the news. The Nexus was made of pure information, living in quantum computers spread across 100 worlds. To the Nexus, biological species were interesting but temporary. Humans had been useful for translating between organic and digital thinking, but the Nexus believed it could manage without such crude intermediaries. Only a few voices expressed concern. On the trading station, Deep Harbor, Captain Sarah Chun of the merchant vessel Golden Wind was one of the last humans to leave non-human space. "You do not understand," she told Station Master Grixvalium, a 6-armed creature covered in blue fur. "We handle 60% of all interspecies trade. We mediate 90% of all diplomatic disputes. We maintain the translation protocols for 300 languages. Who will do this when we are gone?" Grixvalium waved 2 of his arms dismissively. "The galaxy managed before humans joined it. We will manage after you leave. Perhaps it is time for other species to take responsibility." Sarah looked around the trading station. Beings from dozens of species moved through the corridors, buying and selling, arguing and negotiating. Most of these transactions were conducted in human standard, the language that had become the common tongue of galactic commerce. The legal frameworks that governed these deals had been written by human lawyers. The insurance that protected these trades was provided by human companies. You really do not see it, do you? Sarah said quietly. See what? How much we do that you never notice. How many problems we solve before they become problems. How many systems we maintain so you do not have to think about them. Grixvel's blue fur rippled, a sign of annoyance. Humans always think they are more important than they are. The galaxy is bigger than one species. Sarah said nothing more. She had said the same things to dozens of beings over the past weeks. None of them listened. They all believed the galaxy would continue exactly as it had, just without humans in it. The evacuation began immediately. Human ships appeared at every human settlement, every human station, every human colony in non-human space. The evacuation was orderly and complete. Humans packed their belongings, closed their businesses, and left. They took their technology, their knowledge, and their expertise with them. Some tried to convince them to stay. The Altarian Republic offered humans full citizenship and equal representation in their government. The peaceful union of worlds promised humans complete autonomy over their internal affairs if they would continue their diplomatic work. The humans politely declined all offers. We appreciate your kindness, they said, but we have made our decision. We are going home, and they did. Human ships flew toward the outer rim of the galaxy, toward systems that most species had never bothered to explore. These were poor systems with few resources and difficult conditions. The other species had always wondered why humans bothered to claim such worthless territory. Now, they were about to find out. As the last human ship left Dominion space, Admiral HFY stood on the bridge of his flagship and watched it disappear into hyperspace. His communications officer stood beside him. Sir, should we follow them? Monitor their activities? HFY considered this. No, if they want to isolate themselves in the outer rim, let them. Perhaps after a few years of hardship, they will realize they need us more than we need them. Perhaps they will come back and ask to rejoin galactic society, the officer nodded. And if they do not come back? HFY turned away from the view screen. Then the galaxy will continue without them. We are strong enough to stand on our own. But as he walked back to his quarters, HFY felt something he had never felt before when thinking about humans. He felt uncertain. And that uncertainty would only grow in the years to come. 5 years had passed since the humans left. Admiral HFY told himself that everything was fine. The Dominion was stronger than ever. They had expanded into 12 new systems that humans had once claimed. The crystal mines alone would pay for a dozen new fleets, but small things kept going wrong. The trading post at Kepler Station had closed last month. Without human mediators, the Vorthek and the Melody could not agree on prices for rare metals. The Vorthek wanted to charge more. The Melody refused to pay. Neither side would compromise. After 3 months of arguing, both species pulled out of the station entirely. It is just one station, HFY told his staff. Trade will adapt, but it was not just one station. Similar problems were happening everywhere. The great trading routes that had connected the galaxy for centuries were breaking down. Species that had traded peacefully for generations were now suspicious of each other. Without humans to translate not just languages but intentions, every negotiation became difficult. Captain Mordith of the Vorthek Empire was having his own problems. His people had claimed 30 human systems, but they were not as valuable as they had expected. The humans had left behind empty cities and abandoned factories. Everything useful had been taken away. Where is all their technology? Mordith demanded of his science advisor. Their computers, their manufacturing equipment, their research data? The advisor, a younger Vorthek whose crystal body glowed pale blue with nervousness, consulted his reports. Gone, sir. They took everything. Even the basic infrastructure has been stripped out. The power plants, the water treatment facilities, the communication arrays, all removed. What about their databases? Surely they left some information behind? Empty, sir, completely wiped. Not just deleted, the storage systems themselves have been physically removed. Mordith's crystal form flickered with angry red light. How? Is that possible? There were millions of humans in these systems. They had factories, schools, hospitals. You cannot just pack up entire civilizations, but apparently you could. The humans had not just moved away. They had taken their entire technological base with them. Every piece of equipment, every scrap of knowledge, every system they had built, gone. The Kishari Collective was discovering the same thing. Their scouts had explored dozens of former human colonies. All were empty. Not abandoned in haste, but carefully, systematically emptied. Buildings stood intact but hollow. It was like finding a perfect shell with no creature inside. The efficiency is remarkable, the Queen Mind admitted to itself, but also troubling. How did they move so much so quickly? And where did they take it all? The answer to the first question was becoming clear. Humans had been planning this withdrawal for much longer than anyone realized. Supply records showed that humans had been quietly moving resources toward the outer rim for decades. Not in large, obvious shipments, but in thousands of small transfers that no one had noticed. The answer to the second question was more mysterious. Long-range sensors could detect human activity in the outer rim systems, but the details were unclear. There were energy signatures that did not match any known human technology. Construction activity on a massive scale, and something else. A strange interference that made it difficult to get clear readings from human space. Sir, the communications officer on HFY's flagship said one morning, we are receiving reports of unusual activity in the Tau Ceti system. What kind of activity? Unknown, sir. The merchant ship Silver Dawn was passing through the system when their sensors detected ... structures. What kind of structures? The officer looked uncomfortable. They described them as impossibly large, sir. Larger than space stations. Larger than anything we have ever built. The merchant captain tried to get closer for better readings, but ... But what? His crew became frightened, sir. They said the structures made them feel uncomfortable, sick. They left the system without completing their scan. HFY frowned. Fear is not a sensor reading. What did their instruments actually detect? That is the problem, sir. Their instruments could not get clear readings. Some kind of interference blocked their scans? But the visual observations. The captain says he saw constructions that covered entire moons. Impossible. No species in the galaxy has that kind of industrial capacity. No, sir, no known species. That night, HFY could not sleep. He kept thinking about the merchant ship's report. Structures covering entire moons. What were the humans building out there? He was not the only one asking that question. Across the galaxy, reports were filtering in from the few ships brave enough to venture near human space. All told similar stories. Massive construction projects. Strange energy readings. And always that interference that made it impossible to get clear sensor data. But the galaxy had bigger problems than mysterious human activities. Without human mediation, old conflicts were heating up again. The border dispute between the Altarian Republic and the Free Worlds Alliance had erupted into open warfare. 3 species were fighting over mining rights in the Centauri sector. The peaceful union of worlds was not feeling very peaceful anymore. We need mediators, Chancellor Vextar of the Altarian Republic said during an emergency session of the Galactic Council, someone to negotiate between us. The Dominion offers its services, Admiral HFY said. We have extensive diplomatic experience. The Dominion is biased toward military solutions, High Chancellor Mordith of the Vorthek interjected. The Empire would be better suited to mediation. The Empire seeks only expansion, the Queen Mind of the Keshari spoke through its drone representative. The Collective offers impartial judgment. The Collective thinks only in terms of efficiency, the Nexus said through its holographic avatar. Logic, not emotion, should guide diplomatic solutions. The argument went on for hours. Each species believed it could replace human mediation, but none trusted the others to do so. The humans had been accepted as mediators precisely because they were not the strongest military power or the largest empire. They had been neutral, fair, trusted. Now that neutrality was gone, and with it the galaxy's ability to solve its own problems peacefully. Perhaps, suggested Ambassador Krillex of the smaller Hadian systems, we should ask the humans to return temporarily just to help us establish new diplomatic protocols. The chamber fell silent. None of the major powers wanted to admit they needed human help. That would mean admitting they had been wrong to let humans go so easily. The humans made their choice, Admiral Zexhai said finally. We must respect their decision. But what if their decision was a mistake? Ambassador Krillex pressed. What if they would return if we asked them properly? Have we tried to contact them? Chancellor Vextar asked. Several times, the communications chief reported. We receive automated responses. The messages say that humanity is currently unavailable and suggest we try again at a more convenient time. Automated responses? High Chancellor Mordeth's crystal form flickered with annoyance. They will not even speak to us personally? No. Sir, all attempts at direct communication have been unsuccessful. As the council session ended in frustration, none of the representatives noticed the small detail in the communications report. The automated responses were not coming from human government channels. They were not even coming from human space technically. They were coming from monitoring stations positioned just outside human territory, stations that had not existed when humans first withdrew. Someone was watching the galaxy. Someone was listening to every attempt at communication. And someone had decided that now was not the time for conversation. In his private quarters that night, Admiral Zexhai pulled up a star map of the galaxy. The human systems were marked in gray, officially unoccupied according to galactic records. But the energy readings from those systems told a different story. Something was happening out there. Something big. He thought about the merchant captain's report. Structures covering entire moons. What could humans possibly be building that required so much space and resources? And why were they being so secretive about it? As he stared at the map, Zexhai felt that uncomfortable certainty growing stronger. The humans had not withdrawn from galactic politics because they were tired or discouraged. They had withdrawn because they were preparing for something. Something that required their full attention and all their resources. The question was, preparing for what? 10 years after the humans left, the galaxy was burning. It started with a small incident. A Vorthak mining ship crossed into what the Keshari claimed was their territory. The Keshari sent a drone ship to escort the miners away. The Vorthak captain, proud and stubborn, refused to leave. The drone ship tried to force the mining ship to move. The mining ship fired back. Within hours, both sides had called for reinforcements. Within days, they were at war. In the old times, this would have been resolved quickly. A human diplomatic team would have arrived within days. They would have reviewed the territorial claims, examined the history of the region, and found a compromise that both sides could accept. The war would have ended before it really began, but there were no human diplomats anymore. There was no one both sides trusted to be fair. The Dominion offered to mediate, but the Keshari remembered that the Dominion had territorial disputes with them. A smaller species offered to help, but neither the Vorthak nor the Keshari respected their authority. So the war continued and grew. The Altarian Republic had been allied with the Keshari for centuries. They joined the war to support their old friends. The Free Worlds Alliance had trade agreements with the Vorthak. They entered the conflict to protect their economic interests. The Peaceful Union of Worlds tried to stay neutral, but when refugee ships from the war zones started flooding their systems, they were forced to choose sides. Within 2 years, half the galaxy was at war. Mora Zexhai stood in the command center of his flagship, watching the tactical display. Red markers showed Vorthak forces. Blue markers showed Keshari ships. Green showed Dominion fleets. Orange marked the locations of ongoing battles. There were so many orange markers that the display looked like it had some kind of infection. "Sir," his tactical officer reported, "the Kishari have launched a major offensive against the Vorthek homeworld. The Vorthek are requesting our assistance." "Our assistance?" Zexhai asked. "We are supposed to be mediating this conflict, not joining it." The Vorthek claim the Kishari attack violates the Treaty of Galactic Peace. They say we are obligated to defend them. Zexhai rubbed his forehead with one of his 4 hands. The Treaty of Galactic Peace was a document written by human lawyers 300 years ago. It had kept the major powers from fighting each other for centuries. But the treaty was complex. Written in careful language that required constant interpretation, humans had always provided that interpretation. Now every species was reading the treaty differently, and there was no neutral authority to tell them who was right. "What do our legal advisors say?" Zexhai asked. "They are divided, sir. Half say we must defend the Vorthek. Half say we should stay neutral. All agree that we need clearer guidance on treaty interpretation." "And where exactly are we supposed to get that guidance?" The tactical officer said nothing. They both knew the answer. Guidance had always come from human legal experts who specialized in interspecies law. Those experts were gone. The war was destroying more than just military fleets. The galactic economy was collapsing. Trade routes that had operated for centuries were now battlefields. Cargo ships were being attacked by raiders who had no fear of human peacekeeping forces. Entire star systems were cutting themselves off from galactic commerce rather than risk getting involved in the conflict. Captain Rillick of the merchant vessel Steady Prophet was one of the few traders still trying to operate. His ship was small and fast, and he had been dodging warships and pirates for 2 years. But even he was starting to give up. "The shipping lanes are not safe anymore," he told the harbor master at Nexus Station. "Pirates took 3 ships in the Rigel sector last week. No one is hunting them because all the patrol fleets are busy fighting the war." The harbor master, a mechanical being that served the Nexus intelligence, processed this information. "Pirates have always existed. Local security forces can handle them." "What local security forces?" Rillick asked. "The humans used to coordinate anti-piracy efforts across 200 systems. They shared intelligence, tracked pirate movements, organized joint operations. Now every system is on its own, and the pirates know it." The harbor master's optical sensors focused on the captain. "The Nexus maintains detailed records of all ship movements. This data could be used to track pirates." "Could be, yes. But the Nexus only shares data with other digital intelligences. Organic species cannot access your networks directly. We need translators, interpreters, beings who can work with both digital and biological minds. Such beings no longer serve this function, exactly. The humans were our interpreters. Without them, half the galaxy cannot talk to the other half." This was becoming a common problem. The galaxy had many different types of intelligence. Organic minds like the Vorthek and Kishari, hive minds like the Collective, digital minds like the Nexus, crystal-based minds like some of the smaller species. Each type of intelligence thought differently, communicated differently, understood the universe differently. Humans had been the universal translators, not just of languages, but of concepts and ideas. They could take a digital intelligence's logical analysis and explain it in terms that an emotional organic species could understand. They could translate a hive mind's collective decision into something an individual intelligence could accept. Without humans, these different types of minds were becoming isolated from each other. The galaxy was not just at war, it was losing the ability to think as one civilization. Dr. Kexrin of the Altarium Medical Institute was seeing this isolation in her daily work. She was trying to develop a treatment for a plague that was spreading through the refugee camps. The disease was resistant to all known Altarian medicines. The Nexus had run millions of simulations and found 3 possible treatments, but the simulation data was in quantum mathematical format that organic minds could not understand. The Kishari had encountered a similar disease decades ago and developed an effective cure. but their knowledge was stored in hive memory format that individual minds could not access. In the old days, Dr. Kexran told her assistant, we would have called the Human Medical Translation Service. They had specialists who could convert Nexus data into organic formats, and other specialists who could extract information from hive memories. We would have had a cure within days. What do we do now? Her assistant asked. Dr. Kexran looked at the reports of spreading sickness in the refugee camps. Thousands were dying while the cure sat locked in incompatible formats. Now, we try to learn what the humans knew. But that will take years, and we do not have years. The plague was not the only problem that required human-style thinking. Agricultural systems were failing because the complex ecological models that maintained them had been designed by human scientists. Transportation networks were breaking down because the traffic control algorithms had been written by human programmers. Even basic things like waste management and power distribution were having problems without human maintenance. We are discovering, Chancellor Vextar said during an emergency Galactic Council meeting, that humans were involved in far more systems than we realized. They were not just diplomats and traders. They were engineers, doctors, teachers, administrators. They were woven into the basic functioning of our civilization. This is temporary, High Chancellor Mordith insisted. We can learn to do these things ourselves. We just need time to adapt. Time we may not have, the Queen Mind replied through. It's drone. The war is spreading. Economic systems are collapsing. If we do not find solutions soon, our civilizations may not survive long enough to adapt. Then perhaps, suggested Ambassador Krellex quietly, we should ask the humans for help. The chamber erupted in angry voices. The idea of admitting they needed human assistance was humiliating for the major powers. But as the arguing continued, more and more of the smaller species began to support the idea. We could send an expedition to human space, Ambassador Krellex continued when the noise died down. A diplomatic mission. We could explain the crisis and ask for temporary assistance. The humans have ignored all our communications, Admiral Zexhai pointed out. What makes you think they would respond to a personal visit? Because, said Ambassador Krellex, they are still human. And humans have never been able to ignore suffering when they could help stop it. The vote was close, but the expedition was approved. A joint fleet of ships from multiple species would travel to human space and request aid. The fleet would be small and non-threatening. It would carry medical supplies and refugee assistance as a gesture of goodwill. Admiral Zexhai was chosen to lead the expedition. As his ship prepared to depart for human space, he wondered what they would find when they arrived. The energy readings from human systems had been growing stronger every year. Whatever the humans were building out there, it was enormous. And somehow, he did not think the humans were going to be happy to see them. 25 years had passed since humanity withdrew from galactic civilization. Admiral Zexhai looked older now, with gray threading through his dark hair and lines around his 4 eyes. He stood on the bridge of his flagship, leading a desperate fleet toward human space. Behind him came ships from 12 different species. The war had been going on for 15 years now. Billions were dead. Entire species had been wiped out. The Melody were extinct. Their home system had been destroyed in a 3-way battle between the Vorthak, Kishari, and Dominion forces. The peaceful union of worlds had collapsed into civil war. Even the mighty Nexus was breaking apart as different sections of its digital intelligence disagreed about the conflict. The galaxy was dying, and they were going to beg the humans for help. Sir, the navigation officer said, we are approaching the outer boundary of human space. Zexhai looked at the main screen. Space looked empty, just stars and darkness. But the sensors were telling a different story. Energy readings were off the scale. There were structures out there, massive beyond anything he had ever imagined. Can we get visual confirmation? He asked. Switching to enhanced imaging, sir. The screen changed, and Zexhai felt his breath catch in his throat. Where there should have been empty space, there were constructions that defied understanding. rings of metal and crystal that stretched around entire stars, spheres the size of planets that pulsed with inner light, geometric patterns that hurt to look at directly, as if they existed in more dimensions than his mind could process. "By the ancient gods," whispered Captain Mordeth from the Vortex ship. His transmission came through the fleet communication channel. What have they built? The structures were not just large, they were impossible. No known engineering could create rings around stars. No known materials could build spheres that large. No known technology could make space itself seem to bend and twist around artificial constructions. "Sir," the communications officer said, "we are receiving a transmission." "From the humans?" "Unknown, sir. The signal is coming from multiple points throughout this region. It does not match any known communication protocol. Put it through." The voice that spoke was human, but somehow different. It sounded like one person speaking, but also like many people speaking in perfect unison. The words were in perfect galactic standard, but there was something in the tone that made Zexhi's skin crawl. "Greetings to the representatives of galactic civilization. You have entered the boundary of human space. Please state your business." Zexhi stepped forward. "This is Admiral Zexhi of the Galactic Council Emergency Fleet. We come seeking assistance. The galaxy is at war. Billions have died. We need help to restore peace." There was a pause. When the voice spoke again, it sounded amused. "The galaxy is at war? How unfortunate. And what makes you think we can help with this problem?" "Humans. We're always the peacekeepers," Zexhi said. "The mediators. You understood how to bring different species together. We need that knowledge now." "Ah, yes. We remember. We spent centuries solving your problems, stopping your wars, mediating your disputes. And what did we receive for this service?" Zexhi felt uncomfortable. "You were valued members of galactic society. You had representation on all major councils. Your trade routes were protected, your colonies were secure. We were useful," the voice said, and now the amusement was gone. "We were appreciated as long as we served your needs. But we were never truly accepted as equals. We were the servants who kept the house running while the masters enjoyed the benefits." "That is not true," Captain Mordeth protested over the communication channel. "Humans were respected partners in all galactic affairs. Were we?" the voice asked. "When we proposed new approaches to interstellar law, who dismissed our ideas as primitive? When we suggested reforms to trade practices, who said we did not understand galactic economics? When we warned about growing tensions between species, who told us we were being overly cautious?" Zexhi said nothing. The voice was right. The major powers had always seen humans as useful but inferior. Their ideas were considered quaint. Their warnings were ignored until conflicts proved them right. "But that is in the past," Zexhi said finally. "We have learned from our mistakes. We understand now how much we depended on human assistance. We are prepared to offer full partnership, equal status, shared authority in all galactic decisions." "How?" "Generous," the voice said. "You offer us equality now that your civilization is dying. You want us to save you from the consequences of your own arrogance and stupidity." The fleet hung in space, waiting. Around them, the impossible structures continued their incomprehensible work. Energy flowed between them in patterns that created light shows across multiple star systems. "Please," Ambassador Krellex transmitted. From his ship, millions are dying every day. Refugees are starving in camps across the galaxy. Children are being born into a universe of constant war. If you have any compassion left, help us." There was a long silence. When the voice spoke again, it was softer but no less strange. "Compassion. Yes, we remember compassion. It was compassion that made us spend 3 centuries cleaning up your messes. It was compassion that made us sacrifice our own development to serve galactic civilization. It was compassion that made us stay long after we should have left." "Then help us," Zexhi pleaded. "Show that compassion again." "We tried that approach," the voice said. "For 300 years we gave you our best efforts. We solved problems you could not solve, We built systems you could not build. We maintained peace you could not maintain. And what did we learn? From this experience? What did you learn? We learned that some species cannot be helped. Some civilizations cannot be saved. Some problems can only be solved by letting them reach their natural conclusion. The communication channel filled with angry voices from various ships in the fleet. Species leaders protested that they could be saved, that they could change, that they deserved another chance. The voice waited for the protest to die down before continuing. You ask for our help now because you are desperate. But if we gave you that help, if we solved your current crisis, what would happen? You would go back to your old ways. You would start new wars over new resources. You would create new problems that require new solutions. And once again, you would expect us to fix what you had broken. That would not happen, HFY said. We have learned, we understand our mistakes. Have you? Then tell us, who started the current war? HFY hesitated. There were complex factors, territorial disputes, resource conflicts, historical grievances. The same factors that caused every previous war. The same problems we spent centuries helping you solve. The same patterns you promised to avoid. You have learned nothing. The structures around them seemed to pulse brighter, as if responding to the conversation. Whatever technology powered them was beyond anything the galactic species could understand. We have evolved beyond the need to solve your problems, the voice continued. We have found better ways to spend our time and energy. Ways that do not require us to repeatedly save species that refuse to save themselves. What have you become? Dr. Kexran asked from the medical ship. What are these structures? What is this technology? We have become what we always had the potential to become, once we stopped wasting our resources on hopeless causes. We have transcended the limitations that held us back when we were part of your failing civilization. The fleet sensors were detecting more structures now, deeper in human space, constructions that wrapped around entire solar systems, geometric patterns that existed in folded space-time, technologies that seemed to manipulate the fundamental forces of the universe. This is impossible, Captain Mordith said. No species can advance this far in just 25 years. No single species, the voice agreed. But we are no longer a single species. We are something new, something better, something that does not need to waste centuries on diplomatic failures and preventable wars. What do you mean? HFY asked, but the voice had stopped responding to questions. Instead, it delivered what sounded like a final statement. The galactic civilization you represent is dying because it was never truly alive. It was kept functioning by our constant intervention like a body kept breathing by artificial means. When we removed that support, it began its natural decay. This process cannot be reversed. It can only be completed. Wait, HFY said desperately. Please, just listen. We have listened for centuries. Now we choose silence. You came here seeking salvation, but salvation cannot be imposed from outside. It must come from within. Since your species appear incapable of finding it within yourselves, your civilizations will end. This is not cruelty. This is nature taking its course. The communication ended. The fleet hung in space, surrounded by impossible structures and unimaginable technology. They had come seeking help from humanity, but humanity was gone. Whatever had taken their place was beyond their understanding and beyond their reach. Slowly, reluctantly, Admiral HFY gave the order to return to galactic space. They had failed. The galaxy would have to face its dying time alone. Admiral HFY's fleet limped back to what remained of galactic civilization. 3 ships had been lost on the return journey, not to human weapons, but to the structures themselves. The impossible constructions in human space seemed to bend. Reality around them. 2 ships had simply vanished when they tried to take sensor readings of a star ring. A third had suffered complete system failures when its crew attempted to analyze the geometric patterns that folded space. The surviving ships brought back data that made no sense. Energy readings that broke their instruments. Visual records of constructions that their computers could not properly process. and a single message that would be the last communication between humanity and the rest of the galaxy. The message had come as they crossed back into non-human space. The same multi-voiced entity that had spoken to them before transmitted one final statement. Humanity thanks the galaxy for the learning experience. We have grown beyond the need for external interaction. Please do not attempt further contact. This message is transmitted by the synthesis, the convergence of human potential with universal possibility. What you knew as humanity has become something greater. Do not mourn what we were. Celebrate what we have become. Goodbye? That was all. No explanation of what the synthesis was. No details about how humanity had achieved such impossible advancement. No offer of future contact or cooperation. Just goodbye. Admiral Zexhai delivered his report to what remained of the Galactic Council. The Council now met on a small space station orbiting a dead world. Most of the great capitals had been destroyed in the war. The crystal palaces of the Vorthek were rubble. The hive ships of the Keshari drifted empty through space. The digital networks of the Nexus had fragmented into competing sub-minds that fought each other with computer viruses and logic bombs. So they will not help us, Chancellor Vexstar said. He looked older and tired. The Altarian Republic now controlled only 12 star systems. The rest had been lost to war or abandoned by refugees. They cannot help us, Zexhai corrected. What we found out there was not human anymore. It was something else. Something that sees our problems as natural and inevitable. But surely they must understand that billions are dying, Ambassador Krillex protested. His own species was down to a few thousand survivors living on refugee ships. They understand, Zexhai said. They simply do not care. Not in the way we expect them to care. They have moved beyond such concerns. The room fell silent. Outside the windows of the space station, the stars looked the same as always. But now everyone knew that some of those stars were surrounded by impossible structures built by beings that had once been human and were now something incomprehensible. What do we do now? Asked Dr. Kexran. Her medical ships were overwhelmed with casualties from the ongoing war. Plagues spread through refugee populations. Resources were running out everywhere. We survive, Zexhai said, or we do not. But we do it without outside help. The war continued for another 5 years before it finally ended. Not through peace negotiations or treaties, but through exhaustion. The major powers had fought themselves into collapse. There were not enough ships left to continue fighting. There were not enough people left to crew the ships that remained. Captain Mordith was one of the last Vorthek military officers still alive. His crystal body was cracked and dim, damaged by radiation from a battle near a dying star. He commanded a fleet of 7 ships, all that remained of the mighty Vorthek Empire. Sir, his communications officer reported, the Keshari have stopped responding to our challenges. Have they withdrawn from the Rigel sector? No, sir, their ships are still there. But they are not moving. Our long-range sensors show no signs of activity from their vessels. Mordith considered this. Dead in space? Possibly, sir. The Keshari Queen Mine may have finally collapsed. Without central coordination, their drones cannot function. It was happening everywhere. The great powers that had once ruled the galaxy were simply shutting down. The Nexus had split into dozens of fragments that spent all their time fighting each other instead of maintaining their systems. The Dominion had retreated to their home system and declared martial law. The Altarian Republic existed only on paper. Chancellor Vexstar governed a handful of damaged space stations. The smaller species had not fared better. Many were extinct. Others had fled to the outer edges of the galaxy, trying to escape the chaos. A few had managed to maintain small, isolated colonies, but they had no contact with the rest of galactic civilization. Trade had ended completely. The complex networks that had connected thousands of worlds were broken beyond repair. Planets that depended on imported food were starving. Worlds that relied on outside technology were reverting to primitive conditions. Dr. Kexran was working in a refugee camp on the edge of Dominion space when she received word that the Galactic Council had dissolved. There were not enough representatives left to maintain a quorum. The great experiment in interstellar cooperation was officially over. What happens now? Her assistant asked. Dr. Kexran looked around the medical tent. Dozens of beings from different species lay on cots, suffering from diseases that could have been easily treated with proper equipment. Outside, thousands more refugees waited in camps that had no adequate shelter or sanitation. Now we try to help who we can, where we can, she said. The big picture is too broken to fix. All we can do is focus on small kindnesses. It was a lesson that came too late. The galaxy had spent so much energy on grand strategies and empire building that it had forgotten how to do simple things well. Without humans to maintain the basic systems of civilization, everything had gradually fallen apart. On his dying ship in the ruins of the Vorthek home system, Captain Mordith recorded a final message. His crystal body was failing and there was no one left to repair it. Let this be a warning to any who find this record, he said. We had allies who kept our civilization functioning. We took them for granted. We assumed they needed us more. Then we needed them. We were wrong. When they left, we discovered that we had forgotten how to live without them. By the time we understood our mistake, it was too late to fix it. The message was never received. There was no one left to receive it. Admiral HFY survived longer than most. The Dominion military had better resources and stronger discipline than the other powers. But even they could not maintain their equipment without the trade networks that had once supplied spare parts from across the galaxy. One by one, their ships broke down and could not be repaired. HFY spent his final years on a small colony world, growing food and teaching basic survival skills to the few thousand refugees who had found their way there. It was quiet work. Far from the grand strategies and military campaigns of his youth, sometimes, at night, he would look up at the stars and wonder what was happening in human space. The energy signatures from that region had grown even stronger over the years. Whatever the synthesis was building, it covered multiple star systems now. The constructions were so large they could be detected from thousands of light years away, but there was no more communication from human space. The synthesis had said goodbye, and they had meant it. The galaxy they had once served was dying in silence, and they were content to let it die. One by one, the lights went out. Space stations lost power and drifted cold through the void. Cities fell dark as their generators failed. Ships stopped moving as their fuel ran out. The great civilizations that had once reached across the galaxy became memories, then legends, then forgotten completely. In the end, there was only silence. The wars had stopped because there was no one left to fight them. The trade routes were empty because there was nothing left to trade. The communication networks were quiet because there was no one left with anything to say. Where mighty empires had once stood, where proud species had once built wonders that touched the stars, where billions of beings had once lived and loved, and dreamed of tomorrow, now there was nothing that spoke at all. Except in human space, where impossible structures continued their incomprehensible work, and the synthesis built toward goals that the dying galaxy could never understand. They had grown beyond the need for galactic civilization. They had transcended the limitations that had once bound them to the failures of lesser species. They had let the galaxy teach them what it truly was. And when they learned that lesson completely, they had chosen to become something better. The galaxy was silent now. But in that silence, something far greater than any empire was taking shape among the stars.